first of this year's Big Four has arrived. That's right, the Quest 3 and Quest 3S exclusive Batman Arkham Shadow is out. Is this the VR chosen one that everyone has been hoping for? Or will it quietly slip into the forgotten shadows while we try and enjoy the other amazing VR games coming out this year? I'm going to try my best to keep this a spoiler-free review. The code for this game, of course, was provided to me by Meta. In the description of the video, you'll find my official affiliate links to grab yourself 10% off Batman Arkham Shadow. There's also a link for $30 free store credit if you plan on buying a Quest 3 or 3S and getting the free Batman included in every purchase. Let's get into it. Batman is one of the most beloved superhero franchise there is. It's had an amazing set of games that came before, it's had quality movie, and it resonates with a large following. Batman for me is a little bit like Spider-Man. The reason it's so good is not wholly because of the protagonist, but rather the amazing lineup of villains that the lucky development team at Camouflage get to play with. So who do we get to see? Will you get to go toe to toe with Bane, thaw out Mr. Freeze, or try to resist the seduction of Poison Ivy? Does Batman Arkham Shadow showcase Penguin just when there's an amazing series about him on TV? Killer Croc has to be in there, right? How amazing would that be in virtual reality? I'm afraid I'm going to have to start on a negative before I get into why this game is 100% VR Game of the Year and sits right up there in my top 5, possibly even top 3 VR games of all time. So the villain roster that should be any Batman game's biggest strength is unfortunately the game's biggest weakness. Batman Arkham Shadow lacks exciting villains. Make no mistake, this is a full-on Arkhamverse title, with its timeline placing itself after 2013's Batman Arkham Origins and before 2009's highlight of the series, Arkham Asylum. With all the villains tied up in 4 games worth of story here, I can see why the team would be a little bit restricted in who they could use. Now, don't get me wrong, there is a really cool villain in there that you're going to absolutely love, but as a whole package, I couldn't help but feel a little bit disappointed with the quality of classic appearances. Or was I just spoiled on those previous games and expect too much? Regardless, the actual story is gripping throughout this 10 to 15 hour campaign. A particularly nice touch was the build-up of the relationship between Bruce Wayne and Harvey Dent. A tale of how the two grew up together as best friends from childhood is a really cool twist. I've never seen that before in a Batman game. It really sets up the contrast of the White Knight and the Dark Knight. Backstory like this is told through cutscenes that take a really interesting perspective that just wouldn't work as well not in VR. I've never seen this Batman story told in this way. For that alone, I would recommend this game to Batman fans. You start off the game on the streets of Gotham looking for the elusive Rat King, when your leads take you to Blackgate Prison, where the next 80% of the story takes place. Bruce Wayne decides that he has to work with the inmates to find the Rat King, and the only way to do that is to go in undercover as Irving Matches Malone. The flow of the game is played by alternating between your undercover inmate pseudonym and as the Dark Knight himself. If you ever played 2004's The Chronicle of Riddick Escape from Butcher Bay, then you'll know exactly what you're in for when playing through the Matches Malone parts. God, that shows my age a bit, doesn't it? You'll be running illegal jobs for inmates, starting fights with unsavouries and getting into trouble with prison guards, all in the name of finding out who the Rat King is. Don't turn your nose up at the idea of playing large portions of this game not in the Batsuit. I absolutely loved every moment of this game from start to finish. Playing as any beloved character in VR has never felt this cool, and it just so happens that the best VR implementation of a larger-than-life superhero we have ever seen happens to be the kick-ass Batman. The gameplay is very similar to Arkham Asylum when donning the Batsuit. These parts are very much a Metroidvania game, where you progress through a sort of open world by unlocking new gadgets that allow you to reach new areas. What's really impressive, especially for a device that only costs $299 strapped to your noggin, there's no load times when you're running around Blackgate Prison. The game has doors strategically placed, and when you approach a door, the game will occasionally hitch a couple of frames, revealing that it's actually removing previous sections from the game's memory and loading up the next. It's brilliant, seamless wizardry and a really slick implementation that only an experienced dev team could have delivered. Each new gadget you unlock not only helps you solve puzzles in Blackgate, but also unlocks more options during combat. The fighting does a fantastic job of faithfully recreating what the Flat Games achieved when they set out to create the fighting style that would be mimicked across a plethora of titles to follow. To target enemies, you throw a punch in their direction. That locks you into like a one-on-one, where you might have to block or strike them, which the on-screen UI elements will help you navigate. You can go to town on your target until another enemy wants to get a cheap shot on your back. At this point you hold out your gauntlet to the appropriate side and block the incoming strike, making the fresh combatant your new target. You can target any new enemy by simply looking over to them and throwing a punch. Combat here is like Batman himself, it's methodical and planned. It reminds me of that scene that opens up the Robert Downey Jr. Sherlock Holmes movie. At first, the combat may take time to get used to, but with practice you'll become incredibly efficient at taking down enemies. Again, like Sherlock, Batman is also a detective. Sure, he has the brawn, but it wouldn't be a Batman game unless you were using your high-tech suit's detective vision to prey upon your victims, and even avoid certain combat encounters. By using this tech, you can more easily work with the shadows to stealth kill your enemies from above, or pick them off one by one. Detective vision will let you know which enemies have knives or guns, and which ones are less of a threat and can be taken out last. Other gadgets include staples like your batarangs, which stun enemies, your smoke bombs to get out of dodge, and your gun that fires explosives at a short range, used to blow down weak walls and stun enemies in combat. Each gadget can be upgraded using a skill tree that you can purchase enhancements using experience points earned during combat. A good example of this is the Batarang can be used to deploy sound markers at distance to draw enemies to positions you can utilise. For instance, the other side of a weak wall you just happen to set up with explosives. Batman Arkham Shadow looks incredible. The fact that this runs on a $299 Android device astounds me. Now, this game isn't playable on the older Quest 2, and I can see why. This truly feels like a next generation leap in portable VR gaming. As soon as you get into the game, you'll be in awe just looking at your wrist gauntlets and gloves. The way the lighting reflects off the leather, and the way Batman casts a shadow with those pointy ears, your cape flowing behind. Batman Arkham Shadow is one of the best looking VR games I've played since Half-Life Alyx. Hey look, I'm sure someone like Digital Foundry could do an analysis and tell me that this only updates at half the frames or resolutions dipped in this busy scene. At the end of the day, when you're in there, with this art direction paired with the visuals this team has somehow achieved, trust me, you're not going to know that this isn't at least low-end PC VR. Let's talk about the voice acting for a hot minute. A lot of VR games have such great voice acting talent, and I never feel the voice actors get enough love in these kind of reviews. I'm going to name drop a few actors with outstanding performances. Roger Craig Smith returns as Batman, we have Troy Baker voicing Harvey Dent, and Carrie Payton is there too. You might know him as Ezekiel from The Walking Dead.
For to look upon his glory is to be stricken.
Yeah. So you don't remember anything?
The king's realm exists beyond the walls of our reality. It is not for us to speak of.
All absolute highlights. Tara String does an amazing Dr. Quinzel. Martin Jarvis as Alfred is fantastic. Top spots for me were Elijah Wood. He's perfect for this psychotic doctor who we will come to know as the Scarecrow.
I'm so sorry. I feel sick in my soul for you.
That's it? The subject has no use for your feelings, Doctor. He needs a clinical diagnosis, not a bleeding heart.
And of course, Roger Craig Smith, who's through and through understood the assignment. He truly understands not only Batman, but where Batman is in this timeline. This more inexperienced, emotional Batman, who's not quite the refined hero who can better control his anger that we see later down the line. I'll certainly be doing another playthrough of Batman Arkham Shadow, no doubt, but on my second time, I'm going to try and spend much more of an effort to try and gather all the collectibles. And let me tell you, there's loads. There are simple pickups such as the Rat King idols, but there's also things like little SD cards you put into your arms. That's right, the Batsuit has SD card slots on each arm. 2 SD card slots. Mental. These SD card slots unlock fully voiced narration that are chock-block full of Easter eggs for real die-hard Batman fans. Right, I'm going to try and summarise and wrap this up. Before my final verdict, there is another thing that's been playing on my mind. The game is incredibly polished, yet at the same time I hit tons of game-breaking bugs. These crashes aren't like weird VR jank, the whole game feels super solid, until it's not and it just dies on you, many times. My build was a pre-release build, so hopefully these sort of things are ironed out by the time you play it, but I have to deduct a point for it. Luckily, the game is so quick to boot and load up back to where you were. Actually, you know what, because of that, I'm not going to dip a point. Also, I've been talking to the team, and I know they're dedicated to fixing those hitches. It's a 9 out of 10. It loses a point, as I would have loved to see more classic villains. It's an absolutely stellar game. Must buy or get it free with any new purchase of a Quest 3 or 3S. Don't forget those affiliate codes in the description for the free money. What a time to be alive, eh? Batman Arkham Shadow. See ya. This holiday season is going to be chock-block full of amazing releases, all coming to MetaQuest systems. The big four are Batman Arkham Shadow, Metro Awakening, Alien Rogue Incursion, and of course, Skydance's Behemoth. There is a title that's just come out that doesn't quite make that top 4 in anticipation, but I would argue it probably should. After playing through, it's a must-buy from my point of view.